I'm gonna do a couple more, I think, because I just have seen so many things and I just want to get all my thoughts out there before they kind of escape my memory and I struggle to remember details from the film because I see so many things and it's just hard to kind of keep it all um, in your head after you've seen so many. So one of the other films I saw recently um, was Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris, and I think some people may be familiar with it because of its the remake. I think in the early 2000s by Steven Soderbergh, that I think starred George Clooney. I've never seen the film. I've never seen the remake. I mean, but I've just recently saw Solaris, the original film from '72. Again, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky, who is probably known in film circles and film criticism and film theory and just the film cinephilic world in general as perhaps one of the greatest directors of all time, if not just, the greatest director in Russian history. He didn't actually make that many films, I think. I think he made probably 7 or 8. But all of them have been widely acclaimed and they've all been kind of groundbreaking in different kind of ways. From what I hear, I haven't really seen any except for his first film, which is Ivan's Childhood, which is one of my favorite films of all time. The reason why I haven't seen his films is because I think I've wanted to see them in order, but I just haven't been able to. I saw Ivan's Childhood, I think 2 years ago, I think, and I've been waiting for Andrei Rublev to show, and I've never been able to see it. So, Solaris is the third one, I think. So I'm glad to have been able to see that over the weekend, or over last weekend. And it is pretty fantastic. It is, I don't want to get too bogged down in the plot, but it is this kind of science fiction film about a psychologist who is sent to a space station hovering around this new planet called Solaris, and it's kind of weird. It's a weird unknown planet that people are still trying to figure out, and people don't fully understand the extent to which the extent to which it is different from Earth, and whether or not the fields around the planet affects the passengers of the spaceship, because there have been people who've come back who in the eyes of many people around them sound very delirious, so they kind of sent the psychologist up there to examine what's going on. And it's a very bizarre film, but what surprised me a lot about Solaris, that I didn't expect to be surprised about, was that it was a film with a lot of heart, I think. And the reason why I was surprised by it, because I guess in my head I kind of associated it with 2001: A Space Odyssey, which came out a couple of years prior, and this kind of hard sci-fi kind of film that was kind of watching it, you feel very detached from the characters and the situations, and you're more of just sitting back in awe with watching kind of the mystery of sorts. And I thought Solaris would be similar, but Solaris is actually very grounded and heartfelt, and the film, well encased in a kind of science fiction cloth, is really about love, about relationships, about specifically the relationship between the psychologist, main character, and his wife, who had recently passed away. And it's about change and moving on, and to some extent I got reminded at some points of Blade Runner, because there is I don't want to spoil it, but there is a character in the film that is struggling to make sense of their own realness, in a way that, if you're familiar with Blade Runner, one of the biggest questions is whether or not the protagonist is a replicant, which is, this kind of robot of sorts. Or if the character was a real human, and whether or not it made a difference. And this film kind of has a similar kind of theme going on, which, but you have to kind of remember, Blade Runner came out a couple of years after this, but right now I'm actually checking out When Androids Dream. Perhaps so Philip K. Dick's novella actually came out earlier, so perhaps Solaris was inspired by it to some extent. But it's a very grand film, and it's not as special effects laden and awe-inspiring as 2001, but it is much more heartfelt and grounded, and you feel, by the end of it, you feel a lot of, heavy sense of loss, and you feel a lot what the characters are feeling in the film. It is quite remarkable, and I wish I have a chance to see more of Tarkovsky's films. Ivan's Childhood is one of my favorite films I've ever seen. And there's just something about the way Tarkovsky frames his characters that give them so much humanity. It is something that's hard to really articulate without actually seeing one of his films. I'm sure there are many video essays about it, but he has so much care and love for his characters, and you can tell with every single frame and every shot and every piece of dialogue that he wants us to empathize with them very much. And I think that is what drew me to the film, and what I appreciated so much about it, in a way that I didn't necessarily have that same thing with 2001, which isn't something negative about 2001. They're just very different films trying to do different things, and I'm really glad that I was able to see this, and I'm hoping that if you ever have a chance to see it in the theater, there's some spectacular sets in the film and the framing, and just I think seeing things in the theater is much better. But of course, not everyone has that opportunity. So if you have a chance to see this on the Blu-ray or something, definitely check it out. It's pretty fantastic.